Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 6 articles for you in this episode, and all the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. Article that I have for you here is off of libertyheadlines.com. It says, Trump's budget, $1.5 billion for border wall, 28% slash to the State Department. This is off of the Daily Signal. It says the first payment for President Donald Trump's long-promised border wall will be $0.5 billion. Mulvaney, or try this again. There you go. The director of Office of Management and Budget. Easy for me to say, huh? Gee. Mulvaney spoke to reporters Wednesday about Trump's administration's next proposed budget that would slash more than a quarter of total funding from State Department, primarily in foreign aid, 10% budget hike for the Pentagon. The Trump budget proposal also increases funding for the Department of Homeland Security by 6%, Mulvaney told reporters in a briefing that was until after midnight. The first budget, Mulvaney said. He noted the president's campaign promises and added, "We turn numbers." The budget proposal would essentially divest taxpayers from corporate to public broadcasting, which runs National Public Radio and Public Broadcasting Service. "We proposed ending funding," he said. "It's an elimination, but you'll see an amount in the budget, money, that is necessary for us to unwind our involvement with the corporate forecasting." The budget blueprint, set for release at 7 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday, deals only with discretionary spending. So while Mulvaney says the spending plan doesn't add to the federal deficit, the White House doesn't have a projection as to when or if the budget could be balanced over the next decade. The U.S. government is projected to spend $4 trillion next year, 2/3 mandatory spending going to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the national debt. This spending will reportedly stay in place. Mulvaney further explained individual departments and agencies would determine the budget line proposal to be released in May. The BizPac Review. It says, get ready for meltdowns because a liberal lamb is up for slaughter in Trump's new budget. President Donald Trump proposed completely eliminating the National Endowment for Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities in his first budget released on Thursday. News of the proposed caused a wave of deep fear to pass through the arts community as people realized their cherished funding might actually be cut off, reports the New York Times. While Republicans have proposed eliminating the endowments before, the party has never been in such a strong position to actually follow through and shut them down. A deep fear came to pass for many artists, museums, and cultural organizations nationwide early on Thursday morning. The dramatic first sentence of the New York Times report on proposal begins. Trump is the first president to propose closing down the agencies since they were created in 1965 by Lyndon B. Johnson, who said it's crucial for civilized nations to value the arts and humanities. Although funds for endowments make up a tiny fraction of the federal government's $1 trillion budget, some $300 million they receive annually is certainly a hefty sum. And Raimundo J. Rogius put out a tweet that says 1987 photo of a crucifix submerged in a glass of the artist's urine, sponsored and paid for by NEA, don't save the NEA, self-fund, and that's from Twitter. It says the endowments are cherished in particular by progressives who believe the government should make sure arts and humanities thrive in the country, while they've long drawn ire from conservatives who see it as a waste of tax dollars. Critics often point out storage or bizarre uses of the money, such as one government-funded artist who took a picture of a crucifix submerged in a jar of his own urine, or the time the endowment sent several puppeteers on a trip to Mexico for a 3-day conference. The president's budget typically serves as more of a statement of priorities than anything else. Since Congress is ultimately responsible for drafting and passing its own budget, nevertheless, the arts community is worried given the immense power Republicans have in control of both the House and the Congress. We are greatly saddened to learn for elimination as the NEH has made a significant contribution to the public good, William Adams, chairman of the Humanities Endowment, said in a statement. So there's that. You have to set your priorities. The nation has got to be kept safe. We've got to have our military, and we are working at a $20 trillion deficit in the country. Try running a household with such debt, you're not bringing in enough money to pay for the debt, and the interest rates are rising. It comes down to common sense, which the country is sorely lacking. The next article is off of BizPac Review. It says President Trump wants to slash EPA's budget to the lowest level in 40 years. President Donald Trump will recommend cutting the EPA budget 31%. Trump will release his skinny budget Thursday morning, broadly laying out the White House's budget request. Trump will push for $2.6 billion cut to EPA's budget. Congressional staffers familiar with the request told NYT. Previous reporting indicated Trump wanted to cut EPA's budget 25% or $2 billion and reduce its staff by 20% employees. But in the last couple of days, sources told reporters the cuts would likely be deeper. Trump is expected to cut dozens of EPA global warming programs, funding to environmental groups, and state grants. EPA Administrator Scott, he would push to protect grants to states for environmental cleanup and water infrastructure. EPA official David Schneier indicated at an Energy Bar Association meeting Monday that closing the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance is a real live issue, not just an EPA, but at the White House. They really want to cut staff. They're not joking around. Being told inside EPA, stating Schneier's comments, this is not a fake thing. If Congress approves of the cuts, EPA will see its budget cut from $8.2 billion to $5.7 billion, the lowest funding level in 40 years, adjusted for inflation. EPA's 15,000 strong workforce could be cut to 12,000 employees. Cut funding for the civilian bureaucracy to fund a $54 billion increase in defense spending. But the big question is if such cuts will make it through Congress. Thursday is only a rough first draft presidents usually submit to Congress in their first months in office. The White House will release its full budget request in May. That budget plan will include detailed spending requests for tax reform. A House Committee on Appropriations staffers received the budget Wednesday. Staffers told the New York Times Trump pushed for cuts to numerous federal programs, including drastic reductions in the 60-year-old State Department Food for Peace program, which sends food to poor countries hit by war or national disasters, and elimination of the Department of Transportation's Essential Air Service program, which subsidized flights to rural airports. The next article I have for you is off of Breitbart. Goldman Sachs, almost 1 billion H1B foreign workers, level jobs here. Goldman Sachs estimates that almost 1 million foreign H1B contract workers employed in college-level jobs throughout the United States, even though many media outlets routinely say the federal government approves only 85,000 H1B visas a year. February estimate of the H-1B population also ignores multiple other visa programs which allow graduates to work in the United States. These other temporary work visas are used to employ an additional 470,000 foreign college graduates in the U.S., according to a study released on March the 7th by Left of Center Economic Policy Institute. The EPI study, titled Temporary Foreign Workers by the Numbers, says U.S. companies employ roughly 470,000 foreign professionals via the little-known OLJ, OPT, and the TN visas. The study estimates that the H-1B population lower level of only 460,000 employees, as EPI says many H-1B workers quickly get permanent green cards, which converts them into legal residents and not contract workers. If Goldman estimates, I'll try this again. If Goldman's estimate of almost 1 million H-1B is combined with the EPI's estimate of various other skilled white-collar visa programs, then the government data shows that the U.S. companies employ roughly 1.4 million college graduate temporary workers in the United States. The imported workers are not immigrants, citizens, legal residents, or green card holders, but are supposed to return home after several years. Companies have used them to fill enough outsourced jobs to fully employ nearly all Americans who graduated from college with skilled degrees in 2015 and 2016. White-collar temporary workers has pushed many established U.S. workers out of jobs, partly because none of the visa programs can be hired before foreigners. I'm working at one of the Home Depot hardware stores. There's a lot of people in my position, said Les, a former New York City technology worker for Disney, Pearson Publishing, and other U.S. companies. He was pushed out of the business when companies outsourced their U.S. workplaces to Indian companies need U.S.-based H-1B workers to link their U.S. clients to outsourcing offices in India. Year-old teenager to raise and would return to the sector if he got a job offer, he said. That's what I know. It is not like I could go back to school to become a dentist or a lawyer or a teacher, he told Breitbart News. The two new reports also that the U.S. companies also employ roughly 185,000 foreign blue-collar temporary workers, plus roughly 200,000 foreign white-collar workers, temporary workers. The EPI report also says the population of agricultural contract workers is roughly 75,000, or just of at least 930,000 university-trained guest workers resident in the United States. Base population of professional grade foreign contract workers ranging from 1.4 million up to 1.8 million is a problem for President Donald Trump, who repeatedly promised to reform the H-1B program during his 2016 campaign. I will end forever the use of H-1B as a cheap labor program and institute an absolute requirement to hire American workers first for the visa and immigration program. He said a Trump statement in 2016, no exceptions. In his inauguration speech, Trump declared his national economic policy is buy American, hire American. Not revamp the H-1B program, although his deputies have temporarily ended a fast-track H-1B approval process supported by business groups. That change was adopted amid intense lobbying by brand name companies, including Google, Microsoft, Facebook, to preserve the annual inflow of cheap white-collar workers. On April the 3rd, the Department of Labor will start distributing another 85,000 H-1B visas to companies as required by law. White House officials suggest that reform of H-1B program will be linked to larger plan to comprehensively reform the nation's family chain immigration system into Trump's proposed merit-based immigration system. Business groups will likely oppose Trump's merit-based immigration reform unless they can negotiate a promise for additional H-1B contract workers. In 2013, Democratic politicians supported this negotiated demand by business groups because the business groups promised to politicians to create a path to citizenship for the resident population of at least 11 million. Trump would be reluctant to endorse any increase in contract workers because polls show that voters, especially his voters, want Americans to get jobs before companies can import more contract workers. For years, blue-collar paychecks or pay packets by the large population of 8 million working illegal immigrants and by the legal immigration of roughly 800,000 non-college immigrants each year. Americans now face a growing economic threat from the inflow of university-grade contract workers. No matter their skills, American white-collar workers face a huge disadvantage because guest workers have a much greater incentive to work long hours at low wages. And it is the federal government's willingness to offer a deferred bonus of citizenship to foreign workers who stay in their jobs or in their temp jobs for 6 to 10 years. This government deferred compensation package is worth many millions of dollars to contract workers, partly because the citizenship benefit can be duplicated for their spouses, children, parents, siblings, and those benefits of citizenship are vast. They include all of the rights enunciated in the U.S. Constitution, plus the right to live in a high-trust society, largely free of petty corruption, clannishness, or tribalism of class, caste, racial, or regional discrimination, plus to the efficient economy, the free education system, the massive federal welfare system, and the national banking system, plus physical security of insured by gun rights, law-abiding neighbors, efficient police, and military services. But companies cannot offer American job seekers this subsidy instead of wages because the Americans already are citizens. An American instead of a foreign contract worker, companies have to pay Americans their full unsubsidized marketplace value. So the hidden federal subsidy of citizenship for foreigners skews hiring practices in favor of foreign workers, much to the disadvantage of the 800,000 young Americans who graduate with skilled degrees each year. Federal data shows that relatively few Americans graduates even get jobs in the highly skilled sector which they studied at great cost in university. The U.S. Census Bureau reported that in 2014, 34% of those who have a bachelor's degree in science, technology, engineering, and math, commonly referred to as STEM, are not employed in STEM occupations. According to new statistics from the 2012 American Community Survey, engineers and engineering and computer, math, and statistics majors had the largest share of graduates going into a STEM field, with about half employed in STEM occupations. Science majors had fewer of their graduates employed in STEM. Roughly 660,000 foreign H-1B workers are employed throughout the United States software business, says Goldman's report. In writing software, but many foreigners are hired as chief managers, business experts, financial analysts, and salesmen by American and foreign-owned companies. An additional 340,000 H-1B contract workers are employed throughout the nation as doctors, therapists, and pharmacists, professors, engineers, and financial planners, managers and designers, soccer coaches, and economic teachers, government scientists, and university lab technicians, architects, lawyers, and even journalists, according to job descriptions found at jobs.com. Amid this widespread use of white-collar contract workers, the salaries of young American professionals have stalled since the real estate bubble imploded. In the past 5 years, they've gone by roughly 1% a year after deducing inflation, according to a January 2017 report titled National Compensation Forecast by the Economic Research Institute. year period, slow growing salaries increased company profits, and sales have pushed the Dow Jones index of stocks up by 60%. If the contract worker program were sharply reduced, American companies to compete for a limited pool of Americans by offering higher salaries. The resulting tight labor market for American graduates would push up average salaries, give underemployed graduates an escape from low-wage jobs such as Starbucks, boost recruitment of older professionals, spur productivity-boosting technology investment, and also greatly increase the opportunities for American teenagers, dropouts, and the unemployed to study for college degrees. Even minor reforms of the H-1B program, such as minimum salary rules, would boost salaries by 10% for many employees of Indian-owned outsourcing companies, says Goldman Sachs report. The lack of public data about the number of resident H-1Bs is absurd, said Mark Kilcorian, the director of the Center for Immigration Studies. Piece of information that the public should know, and the problem is not even that the government has the numbers and isn't releasing them. Rather, the government doesn't know the number itself, he said. The establishment media tend to ignore the issue of H1B numbers, or just to highlight the annual inflow of guest workers instead of describing the full resident population. Calculating the total number is different. The guest worker program is managed collectively by the Department of Labor, State, and Homeland Security. Each agency collects data on different aspects of the program, including the number of requests for its work visas, the number of visas that are approved, and the arrival or departure of contract workers. For details of the H-1B program are complex. The basic regulations say each H-1B visa lasts for about 3 years and can be automatically extended for another 3 years. In theory, that would limit the H-1B population to a maximum of 6 times the annual apparent cap of 85,000, or a total of 510,000. But the program has many loopholes, which are used by immigration lawyers to bring in an extra 20,000 extra H-1B workers per year, to lengthen the stay of many H-1Bs by several years, and to get work permits for some spouses of H-1B workers. Goldman Sachs' February study, titled "The H-1B Visa Debate, a Global Frequently Asked Question for Investors," tried to count these extra workers and extra years, saying, "We estimate that 900,000 to 1 million individuals are working under H-1B visas in the U.S. today, based on the assumption that most existing visas are renewed for a second term, and that about 2/3 of qualified H-1B visa holders eventually reapply for a green card based on average wait times and green card quotas for countries affected. Figures would be slightly higher when including spouses of H-1B visa holders, which could be as many as 500,000 people, based on prevailing marriage rates of roughly 50% across the countries." That number is much larger than the 2011 estimate by the nonpartisan Center for Immigration Studies, which estimated the population of H-1Bs to be roughly 650,000. Both the EPI and the Goldman Sachs studies ignore different parts of the massive white-collar contract labor force in the United States. The Goldman report understates the total number of foreign-born white-collar contract workers in the United States by downplaying several additional visa programs that are similar to the H-1B program. The EPI report shows that these individual visa programs keep an extra population of roughly 450,000 skilled white-collar workers in the United States. For example, the EPI study says the J visa delivers roughly 56,000 professionals. The optional practice training program employs almost 140,000 graduates. The free trade visa supplies another 50,000 professionals, and the L visas allow 350,000 blue-collar or white-collar foreign company employees to work in the United States. The Goldman report also shows, but does not count, the annual inflow of white-collar workers via the L, B, and O visa programs. The flow of these contract workers is 180,000, said the report. A back-of-the-envelope calculation suggests these visa programs are used by a resident population of 200,000 white-collar guest workers residing in the United States. But the Goldman report also does not mention the J visas or the optional practice training visas for almost 200,000 foreign college graduates to work in the United States, according to EPI. The EPI study ignores the fact that President Barack Obama allowed the spouses of H-1B workers to get jobs. The Goldman report says that roughly 500,000 spouses of H-1B workers are now allowed to get jobs in the United States. The Goldman report does not say how many of the H-1B spouses are working in skilled white-collar jobs, but if that number is only 1/5 of the residents' H-1B spouses, then the number of foreign white-collar contract workers would climb up by 100,000 people. If Goldman's estimate of almost 1 million H-1Bs is combined with EPI's estimate of other skilled white-collar visa programs, the data shows that U.S. companies employ roughly 1.4 million white-collar foreign contract workers in the United States. That's enough jobs to fully employ nearly all Americans who graduated from college with skilled degrees in 2015 and 2016. Even if the EPI lowers estimates for the H-1B population is correct, then the extra visa programs show the number of university-trained contract workers in the United States up roughly 940,000. Goldman's estimate of almost 1 million H-1Bs is much higher than the EPI estimate because Goldman's estimates many H-1Bs are waiting for green cards instead of returning home. Roughly 2/3 of H-1B workers apply for green cards, says Goldman. The pipeline for green cards is very backed up because only a maximum of 140,000 green cards are awarded to foreign employees and their family members each year. This backed up pipeline ensures that many H-1Bs in the United States longer than 6 years by getting 1 year or 3-year H-1B renewals as they await to get green cards. In contrast, the EPI report reduces its estimate of the resident H-1B population by concluding that 140,000 H-1B visa workers quickly got permanent green cards in 2011 and 2013, so reducing the number of contract workers in the H-1B program. Both reports acknowledge that many contract workers get green cards and remain in the United States, but neither report counts the number of former contract workers who have won green cards and who are free to compete against American graduates for jobs. That number is difficult to count because the federal government, distributes 140,000 green cards to company employees each year. Must be shared with family members, including spouses and children. The green card numbers add up. For example, if 40,000 skilled workers get green cards each year for the next decade, 400,000 foreign-born skilled workers into the United States labor market to compete against Americans. If 2/3 of those 400,000 future green card workers are information technology H-1Bs, they will be enough to grab 54% of the extra 488,500 new technology jobs that the Bureau of Labor Statistics expects will be added to the economy over the next decade. Breitbart surveyed the data for the Midwestern states and concluded up to 75,000 foreign college grads have gotten green cards since 1990. Other name brand companies and universities, Goldman hires thousands of H-1B workers for jobs sought by young American business graduates, green cards for hundreds of its employees. The company numbers are shown by this chart found at myvisasjobs.com, government data to track H-1B marketplace. And you can see that chart here in this article if you pull it up to take a look at it. Annual inflow of skilled workers with green cards would be far higher if the 2013 Gang of Eight immigration bill had passed. That bill allowed universities to get green cards for an unlimited number of foreign customers who paid for a master's degree at a U.S. university. The plan died in 2014 when GOP House Speaker John Boehner recognized the high level of public opposition to the amnesty and cheap labor bill. The Goldman report does not mention the semi-secret supply of H-1B visas granted to nonprofit universities and nonprofit affiliates of major companies. Hire as many H-1B workers as they wish each year, and now employ roughly 85,000 H-1B workers as professors, doctors, researchers, and designers. An estimate is only for contract workers holding the renewable 3-year H-1B visas, and it excludes H-1B workers who are in the process of getting green cards. The Goldman report says 2/3 of H-1B holders try for green cards, so pushing up the university's likely employment of H-1Bs up to roughly 130,000 foreign contract workers. That overall university population is likely included in Goldman Sachs' estimate of almost 1 million resident H-1Bs. The EPI estimate says the resident population of blue-collar contract workers is roughly 95,000 workers, plus roughly 90,000 unskilled J1 summer work, travel workers, many of whom work blue-collar jobs. The EPI data also suggests that 200,000 unskilled white-collar contract workers live in the United States. The next article, E&E News. Massive die-offs reported in Pacific Ocean. No fish out there anywhere over a very large area. Where's their food? Alarming, frightening, total failure in reproduction, like nothing we've ever observed before. And there is video in this. February 14th of 2017. Following last year's massive die-off of Italian seabirds. Tried that again. Wow. My eyes see it. My mouth says something else. There's massive die-off of Alaskan seabirds. Scientists still looking for answers. Geographically, and that is lasted a year. That's unprecedented. That's a biologist with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says it's certainly well over 100,000, and it could go many times that. I would say possibly hundreds of thousands were killed. Almost always it's been starvation. Seabirds are top predators. A biologist with Alaskan Maritime National Wildlife Refuge said they're sort of sentinels. They have definitely let us know that there's change going on in the ocean ecosystem. Had exceptionally low birthing season. This reproductive die-off meant a total failure of murre reproduction this year. Reproductive die-off is something we've never seen in murres before, widespread. The refuge, called the AMNWR, has been monitoring these colonies for 4 decades, and it's like nothing we've ever observed before, Renner said. On February the 10th, it said tens of thousands of common murres starved and washed ashore on beaches from California to Alaska. It's because there's no fish out there anywhere. Large area. John Pyatt, biologist of the U.S. Geology Survey, said to see such effect over 2 sizable marine ecosystems is extraordinary. Murres eat small forage fish, which were largely absent. Marine Fisheries Service conducted surveys in the summer of 2015. A conservative extrapolation indicates 500,000 or more common murres died, Pyatt said, were emancipated. We had widespread breeding failure at all of the colonies in the Gulf of Alaska as well as the Bering Sea, Renner said. It was a highly unusual event. Murres don't fail regularly. They died of starvation because there was no food, Pyatt said. There was no food because there was no fish. And it goes on. It's working in reverse order here of the uh, reports on this. But if you want to read the rest of that, you can pull it up and read the rest of that. But that gives you, the basic gist of it. Because the fish are dying. It's off BizPack Review, and it says radio host Michael Savage targeted, left bloodied after violent assault outside San Francisco restaurant. Michael Savage launched his new book, Trump's War, His Battle for America. The conservative talk radio host fought a battle of his own outside his San Francisco Bay Area residence. Teddy had finished dinner and were leaving to Buron, California's Cervino. A man charged up and began yelling, "Hey, Wiener," referring to Savage's given name, according to 415 Media. An eyewitness reported that the assailant kicked Savage's poodle dog out of the way before grabbing Savage and tossing him to the ground. Lieberman reports that neither the dog nor the conservative radio host were seriously hurt, but Savage was bloodied and shaken. Criminal charges, Savage attorney Dan Horowitz told Lieberman, "We're going to seek felony charges against the man, and we're going to investigate this as a hate crime because of Michael's political views." Savage released a statement to Lieberman that suggests the assailant knew who Savage was by his legal last name and reads as follows: "I was leaving Cervino's restaurant when a total stranger followed me out of the restaurant and confronted me. He said, 'Are you Michael Wiener?' I turned to him and said, 'Go away, I don't know who you are.' I turned to leave and he pushed me and I fell down. He moved toward me to push me down and he shoved my 10-pound poodle out of the way to get to me. He has lied and said I pushed him. That's absurd. Both my hands were holding on to things." There you have the Michael Savage story. That's all I have in this episode. Be a live show at 8 o'clock tonight, and it'll have a chat room. If you'd like to join us, please feel free to. That's Eastern time. If you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up. Share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Informed. I'll see you in the next episode.